The peace accord was signed in early January of 2015 in Abuja by the two leading presidential candidates, GOODLUCK Jonathan of the People's Democratic Party PDP and MUHAMMADU Buhari of the All Progressives Congress APC, as well as 12 candidates of other political parties. This exercise was carried out under the watch of the late United Nations scribe KOFI ANNAN and former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Chief EMEKA ANYAOKU. The accord was an attempt to prevent the recurrence of violence witnessed after the 2011 general elections, which led to the deaths of over 800 persons and created tensions in the country. The agreement placed a moral duty on the candidates to restrain their supporters from acts of violence and accept the outcome of the election on the 26th of March 2015. Later, the National Peace Committee, NPC, under the leadership of General Abdulsalami Abubakar, was set up to monitor and promote dialogue between the two leading candidates. The acceptance of the outcome by former Presidents GOODLUCK Jonathan on the 31st of March 2015 has largely been seen as a major success story of the peace accord. Nigeria Today will focus on the renewed commitment by the National Peace Committee to a united, democratic and prosperous Nigeria ahead of the 2019 general elections. Welcome to the program. I am Dennis Adigunloye. The program is Nigeria Today, and with me in the studio to discuss the peace accord and the 2019 general elections is Mike Utsaha. He is a public affairs analyst and a legal practitioner. You're welcome to Nigeria Today, sir.
Thanks, Dennis.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Nigeria.
All right. And also with us we have Austin Irame. He is the Program Officer, Democratic Governance, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC. Thank you for joining us on Nigeria Today.
Good evening, Dennis. Good evening, Nigerians.
All right, you're both very welcome. Now, let's get to it. We saw back in 2015 a major breakthrough in the history of elections in Nigeria, where an incumbent president under the ruling party at the time was defeated. Without the signing of this peace accord just a few months earlier and the subsequent acceptance of the result by the then President GOODLUCK Jonathan, how do you think things would have played out? Let me take you first, Mr. Mike Utsaha.
Let me start with a disclaimer, Dennis.
Yeah.
The National Peace Committee has its secretariat within the Kuka Center.
Okay.
I am the pioneer director of the Kuka Center, so I needed to point that out.
All right.
I was also a candidate in the 2015 elections. For the position, I don't think that's necessary, but I needed to put out these disclaimers so that you and Nigerians will understand the angle from which I'm coming. I am not supporting any already established positions. This is my view about the activities of the National Peace Committee.
Okay.
I think, Dennis, we have not really celebrated enough what happened in 2015. We were just talking with Austin before we came on set about what would have been the state of Nigeria today if President GOODLUCK had said, hey, you know what, I'm not going to be part of this nonsense. We've seen cases like that in Africa. We've seen it in other parts of the world also. And there are real cases. It could have happened here. So I think there are two things that I think we have not celebrated enough. The fact that we had, you know, the office of the President of Nigeria is a very powerful office, almost as powerful as that of the office of the President of the United States.
Yes.
That is one. So he could have said, I'm not into this nonsense, and he could have deployed the resources available at his disposal to say, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
That's one. So we've not celebrated that enough. I think we need to over-celebrate what happened in 2015. Secondly, we have not celebrated the idea, the initiative of a National Peace Committee as a whole is something that is salutary, you know. Again, part of what the conversation we were having with Austin just before we came on set is, well, it's entirely possible that it's actually the National Peace Committee that facilitated what happened, the outcome that we saw in 2015. Yeah. So it's something that needs to be encouraged. We have seen situations here, you know, in Burundi, you know, in the DRC, you know, closer home here in Togo, and in a few other places where outcomes of elections have become problematic and have set the country or the region in some kind of quagmire. And we think, I personally think, we should really recognize what happened in 2015 and give it its place.
Right, a place in Nigeria's history. All right, let me bring in Austin Irame. Give us your take, firstly, on what happened in 2015 with the signing of this peace accord and the subsequent acceptance of the results, and how this relates to what we're going to be witnessing in the coming months with the 2019 general election.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dennis. I think it's just first to say that, I mean, we as Nigerians should first of all begin to recognize that in 2015, it was really one of the very, very interesting periods of our national development. And that 2015 general election actually shaped our future as a nation going forward, in terms of being the first time that an incumbent, the sitting president, would willingly let go of his seats without any form of contestation or plunging the nation into violence. Because, you know, politicians, as it were, are very, very, very self-centered and greedy kind of people. So it's played out in other countries across the continent and even across the world, where you see that politicians do not necessarily abide by peace pacts and peace accords. So he could have well said that in 2015, then President Jonathan would have said that he wasn't going to stick to the pact that he had committed to. So I think it's a good thing that we first of all understand that 2015 was like a watershed in Nigeria's democracy, and going forward, trying to stretch the conversation a bit further, is for us to also understand that in as much as the peace committee still exists, and we want to believe that the mandates are still very present and relevant in today's national development, we must begin to rally around this committee and also begin to speak to our politicians, because look, politicians are really, really the ones that are at play here. We must begin to open up the conversation to begin to engage politicians. We've been doing a lot of talking within civil society. We've been doing a lot of talking within political parties. We've been doing a lot of talking within the institutions as election management bodies and their other stake actors, but we've not been talking directly to the politicians. So going forward, it's time to open up that conversations to begin to say that, look, as politicians, you have that moral burden to be committed to the national development and well-being of the people. For us to begin to understand that it is not mandatory. You must not rule by force. You understand? You cannot come in and bombard everybody into being in office and expect that you are going to rule in peace. No, we've seen that happen, and we must consciously, as a people, guide our democracy and understand that we are all stakeholders in this national project.
All right. Okay. Obviously, it was unprecedented what happened back in 2015. How has this aided in nation building over the last, let's say, 3.5, coming up to 4 years now?
I mean, I would say in very significant terms, let's look at the composition of the National Peace Committee. You have Christians there. You have Muslims, highly respected clerics. You have elder statesmen. You mentioned the late Kofi Annan, of course, our own EMEKA, ANYAOKU, and all of that. So that elder statesmen, you know, group of highly credible individuals could actually come together to say that, look, there is a need for us to intervene in the electoral process or in the democratic process in a particular manner that will, you know, bring about confidence rather than take it away from the system. For me, it's something that really inures towards national development. And we should see more of this. It's the National Peace Committee. But if subject to the resources available to the committee, I think we should see some devolution of its activities even to the states and to the regions. You can see what is happening in Akwa Ibom. There is definitely the need for an intervention of an independent, non-partisan body like the National Peace Committee. So there's a lot of work to be done at the national level, and there seems to be a lot of focus on what happens at the national stage, but a lot also needs to be done at the state level, precisely to build confidence, to push us in the direction of national development, some form of cohesion, especially now that we're about to go into elections.
All right. Austin, Mike just brought up a critical issue there about issues in the states, and some people are expressing concern ahead of the forthcoming elections with regards to security situation in certain parts of the country. How do you see this National Peace Committee working towards reaching out to the state and local government levels?
So it piggies back to my initial point when I mentioned that there is need for us to begin to open up conversations and reach out to the politicians, because there is never a time that the committee will have enough resources to be able to trickle down the activities down to the local government level.
Absolutely right.
So there is need for us to begin to understand, first of all, the concept of democratic governance, for us to be able to tell ourselves and to be able to tell the people that in as much as you go to the polling booths to cast your vote for any particular individual, that person, when he emerges as the winner of election and is being sworn into public office, holds you a duty. So you must first of all be able to understand that as a citizen, and understand that that public office holder is not necessarily doing you a favor. You understand? So the resources, like I said, is always going to be limited. So opening up that space at the subnational level, especially at the local government level, because what we've seen over time, even in times when we've had violent conflict as it relates to elections, electoral violence and what have you, it's most times not at the center. It's usually at the state level, at that subnational level, most times at the local government level, whereby as it was described by Hobbes, that its life is short and brutish there, you understand? So they see these contestations as very, very, very dire to their heart, to their very coexistence. And the politicians, who of course are self-serving, make these divisions deeper, even in states where you have that, because we always talk about the center, we talk about those sentiments that are anchored on religious sentiments, ethnic sentiments. But I tell you, Dennis, even in states that you have that some level of homogeneity, you still have those kind of electoral-related violence when election results begin to trickle out. So it's for us to begin to understand the concept of democracy itself, that democracy is supposed to work for you as an individual, and nobody owes you a favor in the long run, that you're only entrusting power, you're giving power and trust to those individuals.
Okay, well, we'll continue our conversation. We just need to call for a break now. We're going to take this topic to the streets and gauge the thoughts of some members of the public on this topic, peace accord and the 2019 general elections. Let's take a listen.
It's going to go a long way to help this country. So whoever will lose the election will definitely have to agree with the other party.
A pact among the contestants, the presidential aspirants especially, for them to accept the outcome of the elections, for them to talk to their followers so that there won't be violence after the election.
As much as it is what will bring the political parties to understand themselves as a unit, so as to be able to now come up with something genuine for Nigerians to benefit and West Africa as a whole. It is a giant strike in that direction. It's very important.
It will help if the leaders will maintain it.
The program is Nigeria Today, and we are discussing peace accord and the 2019 general elections. Let me bring in Mike Utsaha, once again, you heard some of the comments of some members of the public there.
Yeah.
Just give us your impression of their understanding of this importance of this peace accord.
Well, I mean, what Nigerians have said, the few Nigerians that got interviewed have said, the views they have expressed basically resonate with what Austin and I have been talking about. And I just wanted to add, Dennis, that, you know, most times, more often than not, if you don't count your successes, if you don't deliberately count your successes, sometimes you might be overwhelmed with the negatives and you're carried away. You begin to feel that everything is going the wrong way and all of that. But within the last few years, Austin, we have noticed some significant level of improvement in the electoral process. And I'm talking about the Electoral Act specifically. Provisions have been made that make it a little bit more difficult than it was even 3 years ago to rig elections. The card reader is now illegal. I mean, it has legal backing now. There will be transmission of results from the polling units to, you know, a central collation center through electronic process and to a central collation center. So it's a little bit more difficult. You have seen in the previous elections that we have had, in the elections we have had this year, Anambra, Ekiti, Osun, there have been some kind of resurgence in this attempt to buy votes. It is because it's becoming a little bit more difficult to conduct oneself in the manner that we're used to. Now, I say that precisely because a peace accord will not hang in the air. You can't have a faulty process and then say, well, we had a peace accord, so no. So it is anchored on a certain level of confidence that we have in the electoral process. So we're beginning to see some level of improvement, and Nigerians must consciously sit down and say that coming from 1998 to 1999, right through to 2003, to 2007, 2011, 2015, and now 2019, have we really made some noticeable improvements in our electoral process? I think the answer is yes. And we should look at the peace accord that we're going to go into in terms of significant improvements also in the electoral process. So it's not something that just hangs out there in the air. No, it is anchored on confidence in the electoral process. I mean, does it mean that our elections are going to be foolproof? Certainly no. You know, the last midterm elections in the US, we had all kinds of issues, again in Florida and in other states also. You know, there have been all kinds of complaints anywhere. So
the electoral process is foolproof.
Absolutely. And I mean, Nigeria is no exception. You know.
All right. Austin, obviously this peace accord, major components of it is the political candidates themselves and how they would caution their supporters in terms of their conduct. So what would you be expecting from the political candidates in the foreseeable future?
So it brings us back to the conversation to note that it actually places that moral burden on the political candidates. And it's interesting to see who the front runners are going to be or are in the 2019 general elections. I mean, we already know them. Campaigns are already in full swing now. And in terms of ensuring that post-2019, Nigeria still remains that peaceful country that is not plunged into any form of electoral violence, will be majorly dependent on the conduct of this political class. And we've seen a bit worrying trend emerging in the last couple of months. I mean, if you've been following the media and some comments from some highly placed individuals, you begin to see that these divisions are always deliberate, and it's always from the political class. I can tell you very clearly, Dennis, that if you take a sample of the number of Nigerians that actually are aware that this peace accord actually exists, it will be very, very minimal.
Minimal, yes.
That's true.
You understand? So people really don't care if there's a pact existing. People really don't care which kind of agreements, who goes into what. They just want to know that 2019 is an election year. They go cast their votes for those that have their PVCs and they're going to vote. And post-election, post-E-Day, the elections are released and life goes on. Whoever is declared the winner. So it would then remain with this political class to ensure that they always see elections as a transiting phase in any nation's political history and development. They must understand that elections by our constitution will always come every 4 years.
Okay.
So you must also, in the mix of all of this, ensure that the electoral management body has been doing enough in ensuring that the systems are a bit more foolproof, in strengthening the system itself through the Electoral Act as amended, through training staff and all what you have right now going. But it must also be seen to ensure, because confidence plays a lot of role in all of this. So the people must also ensure that they have a lot of confidence in the electoral management body and a lot of confidence in the security apparatus and security agencies, because we've seen this conversation, and I know you've been following the trends in the elections that's been going on, Ekiti, Eshu, and the states that we've had, that look, security agencies have been fingered as not to have been, has been fingered to have been partisan in some of the states. So how do we ensure that going forward, especially as we progress into the 2019 general elections, that the security agencies are not seen as partisan in such an important election? These are some of the conversations that we should be putting on the table and ensuring that all stakeholders are on board in expanding the conversation for national development.
All right, well, you touched on this issue of security, which is critical, and let me ask you, Mike, the media are channels for preventing the spread of hate messages, while the behavior of INEC officials and security agents could determine the outcome of the electoral process and the subsequent consequences thereof. So should there be a scope and efficiency on the accord? Should it be broadened, this peace accord, to accommodate these critical stakeholders, security agencies and INEC officials?
I'm not quite sure how far that will be helpful in the process. And I say this precisely because the accord is between politicians. It's not about politicians and other stakeholders like the security agencies or even with INEC. The meeting yesterday with INEC was simply to say, well, you're the election management body, and here we are again, like we did in 2015. We're here one more time, and we need you to know that we're here for you. And of course, the chairman of INEC also had the opportunity to explain the state of readiness of INEC and all of that. But I think for me, really, this, like Austin said, this is a critical election coming at a critical stage of our national life. And we will expect a certain level of professionalism on the part of our security agencies. Mr. President has repeatedly said, please play your role, be as professional as you can in playing your role and all of that. And I'm not quite sure he's the kind of person that will say one thing in the public and go behind and do something slightly different. So we really would like, I like what the Sultan did a few weeks back, where he said, well, security agencies, Mr. President has said he's not going to interfere in the elections, and he would like you to also be impartial and all of that. So it's a passionate appeal we're making to the security agencies and every other person who is involved in this election. Let's give peace a chance. They may not be part of the accord, but they have a constitutional responsibility to be impartial and to be as professional as they can in the discharge of their responsibilities.
Excellent. On that very thoughtful note, we bring a close to this edition of Nigeria Today. We could go on a bit longer, but time is against us. We'd like to appreciate our guests, Mike Utsaha, a public affairs analyst and legal practitioner, and Austin Erami, Program Officer, Democratic Governance of the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC. Thank you both very much for your thoughtful contributions on this
Thanks
very
for having me.
topic.
And thank you, Dennis.
All right, and we'd like to thank you to our viewer for your time. Remember, you can watch this edition or any other edition online at www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. My name is Dennis Adigunloye. Enjoy the rest of your day. Sometimes they don't give us enough time.